of Unit 2. Uh, when we last spoke, we were going over the Standard of Ur, the statue of votive figures, and the White Temple and Ziggurat. Another little tidbit that I forgot to tell you guys about, like yesterday, all of these precious materials, like all the like the precious stones that went into this, came from various different places of the region. There was like I think it was like the lapis lazuli, for example, came from Afghanistan. Some of the other, like the red limestone, that came from, where did the red limestone come from? I think it's India. The red limestone came from India, and then like the shells, they came from the Persian Gulf. So what that means is, or what that suggests to us, is that there was trade and exchange of goods and ideas. So that's another evidence, other than written record, of trade in this area during this time. All right, let's move on. So much like, and this region was like, there was not a lot of fortification. Nobody had thought to put up walls around the city or anything like that, or to fortify. So there was not a lot of protection. So these areas were being invaded all the time, and power was changing hands. But like the traditions, they're still pretty similar. Now, like the Sumerians, the Babylonians, they lived and developed large cities, and these large cities were surrounded by smaller villages and farms. So they had an urban area and a suburban area, or even a rural area of the city. Now, Hammurabi, he ruled from 1792 to 1750, before the Common Era, and this is considered the golden age of Babylon. This is when they say that the golden age of a society, that's when the society was thriving. Innovations, there was prosperity, peace. All was good in Babylonia. Now, this brings us to this work. This is the Code of Hammurabi. It's also known as the Law Stele of Hammurabi. Why would we call it a stele? Do you guys remember what a stele is? Okay, it can be used as a grave marker. It's essentially just an upright slab of rock. And this is a almost 7.5 feet tall stone, volcanic stone, basalt. Now, this stele was meant to be placed in a very prominent area, and law students are super concerned about like the bottom 3/4 of this thing, because on the bottom 3/4 of this thing, yeah, that's not pixels, guys. That's writing. That's cuneiform. It's the writing system. Now, this is probably one of the earliest examples of a codified law, right? So it's like it states a law, so it's kind of formulaic. It's like, if this happens, then this happens. If this happens, then this happens. If so and so does this, then this will happen to him. If someone, it's like, that's where an eye for an eye comes into. This is like that's like crime and punishment is essentially what that is. So like law students are really excited about that, because that's really what they study. This is the advent. This is the beginning of law and order. And the reason for this is that the kingdom, like Babylonia, this is just Babylon, but Babylonia was vast, right? And he had to, and these cities, Babylon specifically, was a very urban city. And you guys know about urbanization, right? When you have like a dense population, you get crime. So, in order to kind of like bring order and unify, not just Babylon, but all of Babylonia, these laws were set in stone. This is where we get that saying also. A lot of like the euphemisms we use have roots that date this far back. So these laws were literally set in stone, making them official and the law of all the land. So that's some context for you. The form is just a stele, an important stele. And that's also part of the content, because that takes up about 3/4 of the stele. Now, art historians and art history students are really more concerned with this up here. Do you guys remember what form of artwork this is? Like, what kind of sculpture this is? I updated some of the vocabulary, FYI. This is called a relief sculpture. When you cut away the unnecessary material to reveal an image that is not freestanding on its own, right? It comes off of the stone, but it doesn't stand on itself. So you're carving this away, right? And this is not a bas relief. We saw bas relief. What was it, last unit? But this is a relief, and it comes out pretty far. It's not a high relief, but you would just call it a relief, and it shows us two individuals, right? Now, just looking at this, if I can get that back, looking at it, and if I told you one was a king and one was a god, which one would you say is the god? Who's the deity here of the two? The one on the right? Yeah, that's correct. That's my left. You're right. But yes, the one on the right, the one sitting down. Because what if he stood up? Much like the what's his name? The king in the Standard of Ur, he would breach the top of wherever this is. So he would be much bigger. Now, there are some other, so that's hierarchical scale. Again, hierarchical scale, the bigger you are, the more important you are. So there's some other symbols in here that kind of tell us, about these two people, right? So this is the king, and this is the god. Now, for some reason, what these are horns. It's a horned helmet. There's several horns. For some reason, horns symbolize divinity. horned head pieces, not bulls aren't considered divine, but they are considered sacred in India. But that has nothing to do with their horns. Anyway, so yes, in addition to that, let's compare beards. So then this is Hammurabi, by the way, the king on the left. That's Hammurabi. Hammurabi, he's got your typical Mesopotamian beard, right? He's doing okay. Now the god on the right has a much larger beard, and what that symbolizes wisdom. So he is far wiser than Hammurabi. Also, his feet are not touching the ground, the gods. He doesn't have to touch the ground. That's how elevated. He's still elevated. He's still above the earth. Now, this God is the God of justice, and his name is Shamash. 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 And he was the patron god of the city that it was originally installed or created. So this was not created in Babylon, the city itself, but Babylon was the capital of Babylonia. Now, so what's he doing here? They seem to be engaged in some sort of conversation, right? Because they're looking at each other, and what Shamash is doing, he's handing over the rod and the ring of justice. Now, what that symbolizes is he's giving him divine authority to enforce all of the 282 laws that are inscribed below the relief. Now, what this is, and this is just something that's going to continue throughout time. This is a concept that's very common in art history. It's called rule by divine right. Rule by divine right. And what that means is the ruler, emperor, king, or whoever, is consecrated, given permission, given power by the gods or God or whatever deity has control over the culture. So the god Shamash, the god of justice, is giving Hammurabi the divine right to rule and enforce all of those laws that are written. And that's just because Hammurabi says so. I mean, what this is also is it's an early form of imperial propaganda. And that this is something that great rulers throughout time use. They use visual communication to retain their power. That's just one of the ways. If you can control the minds and you can control the hearts, and then you have everyone's devotion. So this is a very, very bold statement. I'm King Hammurabi. The God of justice says, I have the authority to rule and enforce all these laws. Yeah, that's a big deal. And rulers all throughout history do it time and again. Visual communication. Let's see what else. I think that's really it on that one. Hierarchical scale, ruled by divine right. Anybody have any questions on this one? All right. Yeah, this long pause is also going to be in the. I'm not going to cut it out. No editing. An interesting thing about this. This is in. This is written in, arranged in 51 columns, and it's written from right to left, top to bottom. So the written language is called cuneiform, but the language itself is Akkadian. That's not necessarily important, but just know that that's all that. Those are all laws. Yeah, and in his lifetime, he united all of Mesopotamia, and he took Babylon from like a tiny, small power and turned it into an empire. And after his death, since he was such a strong leader, the empire kind of fell apart after Hammurabi died. All right, so this brings us to the Assyrians. Now, the Assyrians, real warlike people, right? They were so warlike that, they, in order to protect themselves, they built fortresses, palace fortresses. A lot of their work, a lot of their artwork praises the greatness of the king and his ability to just kill. So these guys were really warlike. So where you had like the really kind of like technological, like super smart scientific Sumerians and Babylonians, these guys were really just the roughest dudes that could come along and take all of their cool stuff that they invented. So these guys, they were very warlike. It was all about all the artwork was all about a show of power. A lot of them were hunting scenes to show how tough you are. Super toxic masculinity type. You know what I mean? Dude bros. So they were, when you're projecting all of this aggression, you expect it back. So they built these walls, and on like flanking the gateways to these walls were these almost 14 feet tall sculptures. Now these are high relief sculptures because they almost come off of the wall. These are called lamassu. And what the lamassu were, they were kind of like a chimera. They were a blend of different animals with some human features. So a chimera, that's another word that just who uses that daily. That's like a collage of animals. And so this is and we'll see some of that going forward in art history anyway. And bless you. Blessings. So what do we see here? right? So, and this is really blurry, and let's go off campus for that. Lamassu. I can show you some different views. So this is a drawing of the Assyrian winged bull, or Lamassu. There's a different view of what we have, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this to kind of look at, to show you the, and this is an alternate view of the view that we have for the 250, but this is the same thing. So we have, hey, look at that. A human face with a horned helmet. So these are sort of like supernatural, kind of anthropomorphic almost creatures, right? They've got horns, and they've got like that cool Mesopotamian beard and the awesome Mesopotamian mullet hairstyle back there. They have, what happened? Oh, yeah, I made a mess. There we go. Am I back? I lost my way. There we go. Yeah. They have hooves because they're part bull, part human, and from what we see here, they also have wings, and the wings are kind of like an expression of the ability to move fast, speed. So when looking at these guys, these are very large. Bulls are strong and intimidating, right? So strong, and they're fast. I also wanted to point something else out. So we're talking about the form and the content here, okay? All the different features of this relief. Another important thing to note is, it's blurry. Let's go back here. Back here. That's Stonehenge. Why do I still have that? Okay, so from the side, okay, so in total they have 5 legs because there's simultaneous views. So from the side view, it looks like you have one foot in front of the other. That is a suggestion of motion, right? Because we learned that yesterday. So this thing can move. The wings tell us that this thing can move fast. Now from the view from the front, as we saw here, he's standing still. He's immovable. Strong, intimidating, and since it has the head of a human being and a big beard, intelligent. Now, is that a scary thing or what? Now, of course, we've seen scarier things, right? We're desensitized. The people of this time period don't have all the visual media. Nobody ever saw it back then. You know what I mean? That we're just as a society, we're super desensitized. It takes a lot to scare us now, but this is all the visual stimuli they had, just images drawn or sculpted. So these things were scary. These things were lifelike enough to be intimidating, and that's what they were intended to do. They were supposed to be guardian figures that would protect the whole citadel from physical and spiritual invaders. So complete protection. I think the king, Sargon? King Sargon said, "Carve me beasts from the mountain." And so that was what this is. It carved right out of rock, right? And it's alabaster. That's a stone. So these are the winged guardians. And there's like, I think there's also some discussion that it's also in addition to like being part bull with wings, there's also like part lion, I guess. It's like I said, a chimera of many different animals. So this is supposed to be intimidating. So like even as a visitor, like as you're walking through the gate, it's like, don't mess around. We're tough. And that's what it all was. That's what all the artwork was. It was expression of your bravery and how dangerous and how strong and powerful you were. Almost, like too much. You know what I mean? It's the equivalent to a big truck. I got a big truck. I'm a tough guy. Ram tough. It's Lamassu tough. Any questions over the Lamassu? So yeah. So we looked at the form, right? Human head, chimera, all these, wings, hooves, 5 legs. It was carved from a single piece of stone. That's materials. The type of stone is rare, alabaster. It wasn't like readily found. So again, it's very important. The scarcity of the material makes it very important. Because the whole palace was made out of mud brick, except for the Lamassu. That's it for that one. Any questions? Yes. Well, it would be a relief, but bas relief means low relief. So but it is a relief sculpture because it is carved from one, and it doesn't stand on its own, right? It's not. You can't walk around to the other side and see the other side of the Lamassu because there is no other side. The other side is the wall. That's a good question. All right, we're just cruising along through Mesopotamia. This is the last of the Mesopotamian works that we're going to look at. This is an audience hall, or Apadana. I was going to write that up there. An Apadana is an audience hall. And this is of King Darius and Xerxes, Persians. So we're talking about the Persian people. Get my marker. Now the Persians, the Persian Empire under Cyrus II, he was also known as Cyrus the Great. Whenever we have these, we just call him the Great, automatically, I think. You've heard that a lot. So-and-so the Great, so-and-so the Great. I wonder how great they were. Alexander the Great. Anyway, so Cyrus the Great, he added the territories of Egypt and Babylon to what he already had. So he took over Babylon, took over Egypt. And he later, Darius would add Northwest India. And guess what he was called? Darius the Great. So this was the largest empire of the ancient world at this point. I guess that's pretty great. Now, as the first great empire in ancient history, it needed a proper capital to kind of impress people from all around the world and locally. So it needed to be super impressive. to impress any visiting dignitaries from abroad. And so what they did was they did these huge audience halls, and it glorified the rulers and it glorified Persia. They had these big ceremonies too. Now, under Darius the First, the empire was stabilized, right? Brought order, and roads were built, and there was a system of municipalities established, like governors. So you have an empire, and then you have your officials stationed out there to make sure that everybody's acting right. Now, he initiated 2 major building projects, and that would be called Persepolis. In Persepolis, it was the center of the empire. This was like the jewel of the empire. Now, if you've seen the movie 300, you know that the Persians and the Greeks had a long-standing rivalry, right? Alexander III of Macedonia defeated Darius III. This is like later on down the line, and we're going to talk about the Greeks and the Hellenistic period and all that. And then he took Persepolis over, Alexander the Great. But we'll talk about that guy later. But that's who he was fighting, not Darius I, but the third one. Now, much of the existing evidence of Persian history and art comes from Greek writings of the time that these people were in rule. And it was pretty, since it was written from the Greeks' point of view and they were their main rivals, they talked a lot of trash. Now, many Persian art styles were incorporated into Greek art as a result of that, and we'll get into that later. But this structure specifically, Persepolis, was built over a period of 100 years. And it was built on a terrace that was half artificial and half natural. Now, most of it would be destroyed, 4th century BCE. But it was still impressive nonetheless. Now, the primary building material for all of this was sun-dried brick. Stone was used, as we see here. Limestone was used, however, to provide the supporting elements, like the basis of the columns, door jambs, like the lintels, lintel and door jamb, and of course like the foundation here. Now, we have another term. It's called ashlar masonry. Does anybody know what masonry is? Who knows what masonry is? Masonry is the cutting of rock. Is the bell going to ring like now? We have 5 minutes. All right. We can do this. I believe in me. So it's like when you cut stone, right? When you break up stone, that's masonry. Whenever you use stone for anything. So like for building walls, for laying brick, all of that is masonry. Ashlar masonry is when you cut the stones to fit. So you see all these rock walls that we have, the stones that we use are not cut to fit. They're just stones that are placed in between mortar that holds it all together. But ashlar masonry cuts stones into like bricks that fit together, sort of like Legos. but not quite that sophisticated. But they fit to it. So you can see this here. Everything's cut so that it fits nicely, and there's no mortar in between. Now, speaking of, now that we're looking at the walls, these walls were, I don't know if you could see, there's a continuous band, right, of just decoration and possibly a narrative. Here's that hunting scene. We're tough. I'm the lion. Everyone else is that hoofed creature there. A lot of low self-esteem back then, I guess. But we see all these repeated figures, right? So these horizontal bands, since it's large and on a building, is called a frieze. We talked about that word before, when on smaller artworks, we're really refer to them as registers. But on structures, a continuous horizontal band is called a frieze. F-R-I-E-Z-E. E-Z-E. E-Z-E. F-R-I. Yeah. And so you have friezes of all sorts of stuff, like you have what is it? Well, you have relief sculptures of, like the animal scenes. There's also like some Lamassu, the winged bulls. There's also what is it? There is all these people. I forgot to talk about these people. All these people represent people who come to visit and, I guess, show fealty or praise and subjugation to Persia. So it's like they're telling people, yes, all these people have already said that Persia's awesome, so you may as well too. You know what I mean? Big statement. Now, in addition to that, there's like also some that represent guards, and they were called the Immortals, the King's Guards. They were called the Immortals because there were always 10,000 of them. And these relief sculptures were sometimes painted, or usually painted, and sometimes covered in gold leaf. There were bulls at the top of these columns, so the capitals of these columns are bulls. It's a really, really spectacular structure. Now, the roof that these columns held up were light, probably made out of wood. They don't exist anymore, so they didn't need to be massive. They could be long and fluted, so they could be more elaborate and have these slender columns. Now, there was an audience hall, reception halls, formal halls, and there were even some private apartments that were linked by staggered corridors in the Mesopotamian style, kind of like a labyrinth. Now, only a small contingent of the public was allowed to access the audience hall, right? The rest of the complex would be private. So this whole thing, all the bas relief, the bull capitals on the columns, this was all propaganda to visitors and a reminder for all those abroad to pay taxes, pay tribute to the king in the capital of the Persian Empire. Any questions? All right, we did it. It's exciting.